an unpaid intern in his mother's suffocating, toxic empire. It wasn't until our anniversary night that I discovered the house wasn't just a home, it was a trap waiting to explode. I used to think that a man who loves his mother is a man who will love his wife. My grandmother told me that. My mother told me that. Hell, even his mother, Linda, told me that over mimosas the day after our engagement party. I thought I was marrying a gentleman, a man who valued the woman who raised him. I didn't realize I wasn't marrying a husband. I was auditioning for the role of a permanent, unpaid, live-in assistant to his primary partner. Mark was perfect in every way that didn't involve his phone or his car keys. He was handsome, ambitious, and had a smile that could melt the ice off a windshield. But the umbilical cord wasn't just metaphorical. It was a high-speed fiber optic cable that connected him directly to Linda's every whim. We moved into our first house 3 months ago. It was supposed to be our sanctuary, a place where we could build a life that was exclusively ours. But the locks hadn't even been changed before I saw Linda's SUV in the driveway. She didn't just visit, she occupied. She had a key, of course, and she used it with the casual arrogance of a landlord. She'd be in our kitchen at 6 a.m., reorganizing my spice rack because my cumin wasn't alphabetized for efficiency, or she'd be sitting on our sofa, waiting for Mark to come home from work so she could debrief him on why I'd chosen the wrong shade of gray for the guest bedroom paint. I tried to talk to him. I tried to be the cool, supportive wife. I brought it up over dinner one night, my voice carefully modulated to sound like a request rather than a complaint. Mark, I love that your mom is close by, but maybe we could have just Friday nights as our private time? No drop-ins? He looked at me as if I'd asked him to choose between breathing and oxygen. His fork clattered against the plate. Sarah, she's lonely. My father passed away and she's adjusting. You're being incredibly selfish. I didn't think you were the type of person who would try to isolate me from my own mother. The guilt trip was surgical. It was a practiced maneuver, one he'd clearly mastered long before I came along. I felt the heat rise in my cheeks, the familiar prickle of tears that usually signaled my surrender. I apologized. I always apologized. I spent the next month trying to make Linda feel like a queen in our home, hoping if I just gave her enough control, she'd finally feel secure enough to let go of the reins. It all came to a head last Saturday. I had been planning a surprise dinner for our anniversary. I'd spent all day cleaning, prepping the wine, and lighting candles. I wanted one night, just one, where it felt like we were actually a couple, not a side project in a mother-son drama. When the front door opened, I stood in the hallway, glass of wine in hand, ready to welcome him home to a romantic evening. But as the door swung wide, it wasn't just Mark who walked in. He was carrying a suitcase, a large, heavy-duty suitcase that I didn't recognize. Behind him, Linda strode in, clutching a stack of legal documents and a look of grim triumph on her face. Mark didn't even look at the dinner I'd prepared. He didn't even look at me. He walked straight into the living room and placed the suitcase on the coffee table, right on top of my anniversary card. "Sarah," he said, his voice flat and devoid of any warmth. "We need to talk about your role in this house. Mom has decided that the current dynamic isn't working, and we're going to make some changes. Starting tonight, you're moving into the basement suite." I felt the blood drain from my face, my pulse thundering in my ears like a war drum. The basement? Mark, what are you talking about? It's our anniversary. He gestured to the papers Linda was spreading out on the table. That was before. This is now. You're going to sign these, or you're going to walk out that door right now without a single thing to your name. I looked at the documents, then back at his face. A face I suddenly didn't recognize at all. As I reached for the top page, the lights in the house flickered once, twice, and then plunged us into total, suffocating darkness. The silence that followed the blackout was heavy, thick with the scent of stagnant air and the metallic tang of my own rising panic. I stood frozen in the pitch-black hallway, my heart hammering against my ribs like a trapped bird. My phone was in the kitchen, plugged into the wall, a world away from where I stood. "Mark?" I whispered, my voice trembling. "What is going on?" No response, just the soft, rhythmic sound of breathing, too close, and definitely not coming from the direction of the living room. Then came the click. A high-intensity flashlight beam sliced through the darkness, hitting me square in the eyes. I gasped, shielding my face, blinded by the harsh, clinical glare. "Don't play the victim, Sarah," Linda's voice rang out, cold and razor-sharp. She wasn't just standing in the living room, she was standing 3 feet in front of me. The anniversary nonsense was a distraction, and we both know it. You've been hiding things. You've been keeping receipts, haven't you? Little logs of interference? My breath hitched. How did she know? I had a hidden notebook in the back of my closet, a record of every boundary crossed, every derogatory comment, every time Mark had prioritized her over our marriage. It was my insurance policy, my sanity anchor. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied, my voice steadying despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "She's lying, Mom." Mark's voice drifted from behind the beam, hollow and monotone, as if he were reciting a script he'd memorized. "She's been planning to leave for months. She has a separate account. She's been talking to her sister about a divorce lawyer." The realization hit me harder than the flashlight. He hadn't just been ignoring me, he had been monitoring me. He had been spying on my emails, my texts, my private thoughts, reporting them back to his mother like a soldier delivering status updates from the front lines. "Give me the key to the safe, Sarah," Linda demanded, stepping closer. The flashlight beam didn't waver. "You think you can build a life apart from us? You think you can take half of what my son, earned? You are a guest in this house, a guest who has overstayed her welcome. And guests who try to steal don't get to leave with their dignity." "This is my house too," I snapped, the fear finally giving way to a white-hot, blinding fury. "I pay half the mortgage. I put the down payment down. I am not going into the basement, and I am certainly not giving you access to my private life." "Mark," Linda said, her voice dropping to a dangerous, icy register. "She's not going to listen to reason. Do what we discussed." I heard the sound of heavy footsteps on the hardwood. Mark was moving toward the hallway closet, where I kept my work bag. I lunged forward, trying to get past them, but Linda shoved me back with surprising strength, slamming me against the drywall. The wind left my lungs in a sharp wheeze. "Stay there," she hissed, pressing the flashlight into my chest, searing the fabric of my dress. "Mark, get the phone and the files. Now." I watched in the dim, reflected light as Mark rifled through my bag. He pulled out my laptop, my journals, and my spare car keys. He didn't even look at me. He looked like a man who had finally checked a task off a list. "I'm sorry, Sarah," he muttered, sounding more bored than regretful. "But you just don't understand how a family works. You're a liability, and we're fixing the liability." He walked toward the basement door, the heavy, reinforced door I'd insisted we install for security when we moved in. He reached for the handle and pulled it open, revealing the dark, concrete staircase leading down into the bowels of the house. "Inside," he commanded, his eyes finally meeting mine. There was no love there. There was only the cold, empty look of a man who had completely surrendered his soul to someone else's will. I looked at the stairs, then at the two of them standing side by side, the architect of my misery and her loyal puppet. I realized then that I wasn't just fighting a marriage, I was fighting an institution. I needed to move, to think, to find an opening, but my legs felt like lead. Just as I took a tentative, stalling step toward the basement, a loud, jarring thud echoed from the front door. Someone was pounding on it. Hard. Then, the rhythmic thwack of an axe hitting the wood began, splintering the frame, followed by the sound of a voice I hadn't heard in years, my father's voice, screaming my name. Linda's flashlight beam jerked toward the door, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear flicker across her face. Mark froze, his hands still on the basement door handle, his jaw dropping. "They found us," he whispered, turning to his mother. "Mom, you said the records were erased. You said no one knew we were here. Linda grabbed my arm, her grip bruising, and dragged me toward the open basement stairs. It doesn't matter. Get her down there. If he sees her, if he knows what we've done. It's all over. As Mark lunged for me to throw me down the stairs, the front door finally gave way with a deafening crash, and the frame exploded inward, showering the entryway in splinters. The sound of the splintering wood was like a gunshot in the cramped hallway. My father didn't come through the door alone. He was flanked by two men I didn't recognize. Men in dark tactical jackets that said State Police in bold white letters. The light from their heavy-duty torches blinded everyone in the room, cutting through the shadows and exposing the scene for what it was: a hostage situation masquerading as a domestic dispute. Linda let out a shrill, bird-like cry, releasing my arm as she scrambled backward, her hands flying up to cover her eyes. Mark, however, stood paralyzed. He looked from the police officers to his mother, his face a grotesque mask of confusion and terror. He didn't see the law. He saw the end of his comfortable, insulated reality. "Sarah, get away from them!" my father shouted, his voice cracking with a desperate edge I'd never heard before. He rushed forward, pushing past a heavy-set officer, his face pale and etched with lines of exhaustion. "Dad?" I choked out, my voice barely a whisper. I took a step toward him, but my legs buckled. The physical toll of the night, the fear, the adrenaline, the sudden shift from victim to survivor, finally broke my composure. "Don't move, Mrs. Sterling," one of the officers barked, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. "Stay exactly where you are." Linda didn't listen. She lunged, not for me, but for the basement door. She grabbed the handle and slammed it shut, turning the deadbolt with a metallic clack that echoed through the house. Then, in a move of pure, calculated madness, she turned toward the police, her hands empty, but her posture defiant. "You have no right to be here," she shrieked, her voice regaining its haughty, imperious edge. "This is private property. Mark, tell them this is a domestic misunderstanding." Mark didn't speak. He was staring at the floor, his shoulders hunched, his hands twitching at his sides. He looked like a child caught breaking a vase, waiting for his mother to tell him it was okay. "Mark," my father said, stepping closer to him, his voice dangerously low, "you have no idea what she's been doing. You think you're protecting her? You think you're the hero in this story? She hasn't just been controlling your life, son. She's been systematically dismantling every asset your father left you, funneling money into offshore accounts in your name, framing you for corporate embezzlement to ensure you could never leave her side. You're not the master of this house. You're the fall guy." The room went deathly still. I saw Mark's head snap up. The color drained from his face, leaving him ghostly white. He looked at his mother, really looked at her, for the first time in his life. The blind, unadulterated devotion in his eyes flickered, replaced by a jagged, sharp-edged realization. "Mom?" Mark whispered, his voice trembling. "Is that true? The bank letters, the ones you said were just paperwork for the inheritance?" Linda's face went stone cold. The mask of the grieving, lonely widow vanished, revealing something far more predatory and calculating. She didn't deny it. Instead, she let out a short, hollow laugh that made the hair on my arms stand up. She reached into her pocket, not for a phone, but for a small, silver remote, the kind used for garage doors or security systems. "You really thought you could just bring the police in here, didn't you, David?" she said, looking at my father with pure malice. "You thought you could just save your precious daughter and walk away." "Drop the remote, Linda," the lead officer shouted, drawing his weapon. "Oh, I wouldn't do that," Linda said, her thumb hovering over a red button on the device. "Because if I go down, I'm not going alone. This house is wired with a sophisticated gas leak override.
One click, and the entire kitchen, including the hidden propane tanks I had installed for outdoor grilling, will turn this beautiful home into a crater. It's a tragedy, isn't it? A young couple, so in love, taken out by a faulty line. "Linda, stop!" Mark stepped toward her, his hand out, pleading. "Mom, please, don't do this." She looked at her son, her pride and joy, her puppet,